So we can get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to our first meetup of 2020. Woo! It's very exciting. I'm Angela, for those of you who don't know me. I work at Shopify. I've been here for 3 years. I'm a technical writer on our documentation team, and I write our user-facing support documentation. And I also work on the Shopify changelog. So that's what I do here. We're really excited about this year. We're excited to build our community a little bit more. We're excited to try some more creative sort of offerings, some more workshops. We already have some speakers lined up. We're in conversations with Tom Johnson and a couple of other celebrity tech writers. So if that excites you, stay tuned. There will be announcements on the page as we get dates firmed up. Neil Perlman also we've been speaking to. So we're hoping to be able to have some really interesting talks coming from all over and also some workshops later in the year. We'll be running through to June and taking July and August off, and then September, October, November, just like we did last year. We're really excited about the growth of this community. We continue to see lots of people signing up. So it's really exciting to see how many people are interested in documentation. For those of you who are less familiar with Write the Docs, it's a global community of people who care about documentation. We kind of keep that umbrella big. Consider everybody who cares about technical communication or communication in general, and their users to be members of our community. So it's not an exclusive community. You might be programmers, tech writers, customer support marketers, anybody else who wants people to have great experiences with software. The Write the Docs Ottawa meetup, our group in particular, is part of a family of meetups and conferences that are focused on documentation systems, tech writing theory, and information delivery. The purpose of our meetups is for you to share your ideas about how to make documentation great, enjoy a beverage and some snacks maybe, meet others who are passionate about software documentation in the Ottawa area, make some connections, have a good time. You can learn more about the organization at writethedocs.org, and you can also follow our particular group on Twitter at DocsWrite. So just before we get into tonight's presentation, a few housekeeping items. A quick thank you to Shopify for continuing to sponsor this event. Shopify provides us with the space and the refreshments for these meetups, and we're really grateful that they're allowing us to build community in this way. Wi-Fi, that's the all-important Wi-Fi password. If you need it, I'm going to keep it up throughout Jesse's presentation as well, so don't worry about having to type frantically. Also important is the location of the washrooms. You do have to go through the locked door that you came in. We have these guest fobs over here. You can take one with you if you need to use the facilities, and then just swipe it to come back in. Sometimes you have to swipe twice on this door. It can be a little temperamental, but it will work, I promise. So tonight we're welcoming Jesse Laprade, a technical writer currently under contract with Public Services and Procurement Canada. Jesse's been a consistent presence at this meetup, so we're really excited to have him kick off our 2020 year. Jesse's going to be presenting an interactive workshop on Scribble, the Racket documentation tool. Scribble is a collection of tools for creating prose documents, papers, books, library documentation in HTML or PDF via LaTeX. More generally, Scribble helps you write programs that are rich in textual content, whether the content is prose to be typeset or any other form of text to be generated programmatically. Jesse will be using a text editor to create Scribble documents in real time. So excited. And if you're interested, you can actually follow along on your own laptop. This cheat sheet and the workshop resources are also linked in our meetup description. So if you want to do it later after you see it, you'll be able to do that as well. And this is the slide that I'm going to keep up while Jesse presents. So you've got a link here to the GitHub repository. In the README, there's a link to get started. I'll just show you what that looks like quickly. So just in the README here, it's the preparation.md that you'll click to get started. And without further ado, Jesse. Here we go. Let me just move my laptop out of your way so you're not fighting with it all night.
Yeah, actually, I don't know which one is which. So,
I think it's this way, yeah.
everyone, meet Racket. I mean Scribble. Starting the night off with a really bad joke. So my name is Jesse LaPrade. My pronouns are he and him, but Dan doesn't feel weird either. And I'm interested in programming, specifically in Racket, but I genuinely love writing documentation. Sometimes for my hobby projects, sometimes it's for friends' hobby projects, or whatever I can get my hands on. I'm into decentralized social networks, so a lot of very people-centric and people-ran things like Mastodon and Scuttlebutt. If you haven't heard of them, I highly recommend it. An intentional digital community is Stilltown, which is basically a little computer on the internet that people can write tools and make cool things for each other. So Scribble, as she described, is actually a language. I don't know if you'd call it a markup language or a programming language, but it's a language written in another programming language called Racket. So she already gave you this description here, so I'm not going to read that again. But Racket, Scribble, joke, can be output to HTML, LaTeX source, PDF, plain text, as UTF-8. So all of your emojis are supported, depending on your font. Markdown, and a few others that I haven't heard of, but you can find all the information in this link here. So before we get into Scribble, it's good to know what Racket is. It's a programming language made for writing programming languages. And that's not its only use. You can use it to do general purpose programming. Racket belongs to a family of programming languages called Lisp, which are very old but still relevant. And Racket originally was a scheme. It came from a scheme called PLT scheme, which is also a subfamily of Lisp. That's really confusing, so you don't have to worry about that if you don't understand that. So reasons why Racket's special. It was designed with education in mind, so a lot of popular programming books use Racket to teach programming. Nowadays, I'm not so sure if they still do it, but there are some really good books out there that do it. It comes with something called Dr. Racket, which is a little programming interface that allows you to write code. It'll tell you about errors, where the errors are, and you can see the output of it. And it also comes with a documentation tool, which is Scribble. And Scribble's weird because it's a language and a tool at the same time. So you write in Scribble, and you also use the Scribble tool to compile Scribble code. And Racket understands Scribble as a hashtag language. I know that sounds funny. We'll get to there, so don't worry about that for now. But Racket is also cool because you can change its syntax, and that's why it's great for writing programming languages. And I had similar thoughts myself, but Christopher Lemmer Weber also thinks that Racket is an acceptable Python of the Lisp world. So here's a bit of code. Don't get scared. You don't have to understand this, but it's mostly to showboat Racket and Scribble's capabilities. So you can kind of see up here, there's a hashtag, that thing I was talking about, and then you have Scribble manual. So what this is doing up top is describing which language you want to use. So there's a whole bunch of different languages you can use for this presentation. We're going to be using the Scribble manual language. So earlier on in my tile slide, these circles were generated from Scribble code. And the Scribble code is using a library that was written in Racket called Picture. And Picture is used to create pictures programmatically. So you can do lots of fun things with it. Changing syntax, you don't have to worry about this either, but I'll be teaching a little bit of it. Changing syntax is handy because if you look at formats such as Markdown, it's limiting in the case that if you want it to do something it can't do, it probably can't do it unless you write some wild program to make it do it, or you throw HTML code in there. With Scribble, you can rewrite the language and get it to do things. So in this case, I don't like how Scribble's default bullet lists are not indented. I don't know who would not want to indent bullet lists. So you can actually set a style in set and then say what you want to do. Up here, I've recreated the syntax so you can, now instead of having to write this every time you want to indent bullet lists, you can just write this little thing. Again, don't worry if you don't understand that. This is just showing off Scribble. Scribble's also, Racket was also made to make languages for making games. So Matthew Flatt used Scribble to write a text adventure game, or say Racket to make a text adventure game. And he invented his own reader, and a reader will read code in a certain way. And he wanted a syntax that was easy for writing games. So he wanted his game to have verbs. So up here you can kind of see where it says north or n are both acceptable, and that'll return go north, and accept that, etc. So if you type save, it'll save the game. If you try to get a cactus or take a cactus, it'll return ouch. So you can do a lot of fun stuff. You can find the whole post on this language and this link here. But this is what the game looks like. It's an old school text adventure game. So you can kind of see the north here. I'm pretty sure the user probably could also type N and it would do the same thing. Right? So Racket and other domains. Racket isn't just for documentation. People have used it for academic papers as a replacement for LaTeX. It supports bibliography. It supports different kinds of citations, such as APA, IEEE, and a whole bunch of other ones, or you can make your own. Christopher Lemmer-Weber and Morgan Lemmer-Weber made a workshop far more deeper than my Scribble workshop, and they have lots of good examples, and I provided a link at the bottom to that workshop, bibliography, and basically everything you can imagine. So what does Scribble look like? So this document, if you look at it from here up, this is the generated text of the code below. So you can see down here that we declare the language, which is Scribble. So now Racket knows, or Scribble knows, which language we want to use. And below is the Scribble syntax. So when you're writing Scribble syntax, it uses @ symbols and a word after the @ symbol. And what this is kind of like is like, if you're ever on social media and you're adding someone to talk to them, you can think of it like that. So I'm adding the title, and I want it to make an output. So title, make me an output that says, what does Scribble look like? And that's exactly what it did up here. So it created a section title, and now that also gets added to the side here. So you don't have to worry about links or references or generating or updating tables of contents like you do in Word. It'll automate that for you. Then you have down here sections. This is up here itself, a section. And here's a dead link, just to make all the technical writers cringe. There's nothing here. And if you want to do body text, I found out later, it's optional, but there's a separate way to do body text, but otherwise you can just type text and it'll treat as body text. But you can also do a similar thing where you would do section, but instead of writing section, you'd write para for paragraph. And as far as I know, it does the same thing, but it's so much to Scribble that you'd have to screw around with it to figure out what it does. It's handy especially for showing code. So I'm showing the code right here to you by using this syntax. Now, it has a cool feature where if you see these little sticks right here, I don't know if those are called carrots or not, but what they do is they disable the at feature in Racket. So remember I said the at symbol tells the word after it what to do. So make a title that says this. This will disable that. So it'll just be plain text and it won't do anything. A little note, a little caveat, I actually don't know how to pronounce that word now that I think of it, is if you're generating separate Scribble documents, the title for each document will be rendered as a section. And sections are on the side here, you can see. So that's just a little caveat. I'll put that aside. Again, don't worry about it. We'll get into it after to show you how everything works. Now, formatting. So a handy thing that Markdown doesn't have is formatting. So you can color, you can make text bigger, bolder, italicize if you want, God forbid. And yeah, so it's pretty intuitive. If you were to guess, you could probably guess bolder or bold or bolded. I continuously write bolded instead of bold here. But yes, so the way you would bold text is you just write text in between both of these braces and prefix it with an @bold. And that's not too hard. The fun part about formatting is nesting. So you can go wild and nest things here. And that's how I made it this big font here. So what if you want to go wild and nest like that all the time? I don't know why you would want to, but if you did, you could write a syntax rule for that. And instead of writing the previously seen larger, bold, you can just write big bold, because that's what I call it up here. And you can do fun stuff like that. So whenever something seems too tedious to do in Scribble, I'm going to say Racket, you can just write a syntax rule, or if you're working with a developer, make them do it if you don't know how to do it. So it's really handy because you can automate anything you can think of in it. Lists are not too bad. They look like an eyeful at first, but if you look at them, they're not too hard to understand. So an unordered list, you just put @item list, and you have a little square bracket. I actually don't know what the square brackets do yet, so don't ask me. And then inside of the square brackets, you do the same thing. So item inside of braces, here's an item. And then same with an ordered list, you're just going to do style ordered. And that'll render as follows down here. You don't have to worry about spacing like Word does, where it'll add giant blocks of margins and you can't figure out why. Anyways, yes, horror stories of Word. So sections. I talked about sections and headings, just to remind you. These are sections / headings. They're the same thing in Word. And you basically make a section by doing @section. And that's similar to if you are familiar with HTML and H1 or a heading 1 in Word. If you did want to make a subheading inside of that, it would just be subheading. So I don't know if you can see that up there. It would just be subsection. And then I am a subsection. I can't type today. But yeah, so you just write subsection, and it just keeps going down. So you could be subsection, subsection. Again, you could rename these in Scribble to heading 1 if that seems more reasonable to you. A cool thing with sections is you can give them names. And what these names do, they're called tags in Scribble, is they allow you to reference them. So if I have a section down here with the body text, so I just wrote as an example, this section assumes you have all the items in this stands for section reference. In the requirements section, this has the tag requirements. So it'll actually link to that. So you can see down here, it's created links. This is the rendered output of the code above. So we can test it if you want. So you click here, my screen isn't big enough to make a big difference, but you can see it brought me down there, and that's really handy. You can also see a change up here. My favorite thing is variables because I find that a big struggle when dealing with something like Word or Markdown and you're not familiar with programming or automating documentation yourself. Is you can make variables. So one of them things I used in my configure file is I set my name, my email, and I also made a variable for my colorful banner that you saw earlier. So this way, all you have to do is you type, you do the same things you would for other elements. So you do @ and then the name. So variables could be accessed just by an @ and then your variable name. I don't actually know if they're called variables in Scribble. And then that will render the text that it points to. So a handy thing that I think would be useful in technical writing is things like if you go back to here, if you're working with technical writers, for instance, when I was in school taking technical writing, me and my partner both had different conventions that we had not agreed on for outlining a section outline. So I would say, I chose mine because I like mine better. This section consists of the following subsections, because then you don't have to change any of the sentences every time it gets updated. You can reuse it. So what's handy here is you could just, instead of writing this every time or copying and pasting it, you can just call this variable here. You just do @ section organization, and that will return this sentence. And if you were to change the variable in the file and you recompile your document, it'll change the variable, all instances of the variable. It'll federate across all of the files. And that's handy, right? Because you don't always, and your company probably doesn't want you to waste time going through every file and editing it over and over again. So I think that's really handy. And back to big projects and big documentation projects, it's nice to know where the variables are coming from. So if you just have @Bob, @Sherry, you don't know where @Sherry is coming from. So a cool thing you can do, and this comes from Racket because Scribble's built is a superset of Racket. You can use prefixes. So for my reusables Scribble file, that's where I keep my this section contains the following sections text. So I want to know that comes from there, and I'm just doing this for the presentation, but I can choose to prefix it with reusables, and we've done that up here. So now any other technical writer, or if a developer is going through your documentation, they'll be able to see that this variable is in reusables, and maybe they see mistakes or this is not right. They know where to go to fix that mistake, and it'll fix it everywhere else in the document. And yeah, so you can separate everything into documents, which is handy for keeping track of things. I have a utilities document, and that's where I keep all of my syntax definitions. So I call everything from there. Yeah, so thoughts on Scribble. I don't think it's perfect, and it's definitely not user-friendly if you don't tinker with it enough. But it is handy. It's definitely something to add to your toolbox if you don't have any other options. But I think it definitely has potential, especially if you're working with a developer or you're willing to go through their Scribble documentation to learn how to do things. It's nice to be able to write human language without having to surround everything in double quotation marks. I think that's a big thing that Markdown really shines in, is it allows the writer to focus on content rather than syntax. And this might be where Scribble falls short, but at least you don't have those double quotation marks that you have to surround everything. So yeah, I'll move on to the workshop now. I wanted to acknowledge, I want to thank Andrew Johnson for giving me the chance to speak here. I want to thank Shopify for hosting this. I know that costs money. I want to thank Insom for hosting an instance that I'm always on. I'm learning a bit, lots of stuff from people posting. Archangelic, my friend online, makes all kinds of awesome bots. Self-same basically got me into programming. Vilna, he hosts Till Town. I'm probably on there all day, every day. Terry Kosick, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. You don't really know me, but I really like your writing style, and your workshops are a great reference. And all the Racket contributors. So Greg Hendershot, I believe Christopher Limmer-Weber is also doing that for making awesome language. So let's move on to the workshop. If nothing breaks. So if you saw the post in the meetup, there should be a link, or was it? Okay, yeah, sorry, already there. There should be a link either to a GitHub gist, or you can check this link out here to check out what you need to follow along this workshop. I'm assuming you've already followed it because I don't have a lot of time to go through this entire preparation sheet, so I'm going to jump right in. So during this workshop, I'm going to use this Scribble playground that I've made. It's a github.com M455 Scribble playground, and I'm going to fool around with stuff in there, kind of show you basic stuff in Scribble. We're going to make a few errors and learn how to fix those errors. So yeah. So let's look at the document structure. I've organized it in a way that if you did turn this into a bigger project, hopefully it's easier to maintain. So I made a separate image folder. This Markdown folder shouldn't be here. So we have, sorry, that's I'm on the wrong one. Okay, there we go. That's much better. So we have, let's remove something I shouldn't have removed, that's okay. So we have a source file, and that's where all of our Scribble documents will be. So one thing, and I don't know if it's good practice or not, because I don't know what good practice is in Scribble, because it's not widely used, is I have a main Scribble document. You can see at the bottom here, I'm in a file called main.scribble. And basically, I'm going to have a whole bunch of sections. So I have a whole bunch of sections here, and this is kind of where you can order them. So if I had a file called cool and what, why would you name them those? I don't know. You could just reorder them, recompile them if you wanted, and it'll generate what we saw earlier in a new order. So let's just go over what we have here. So on my main one, I've already set up it to reference variables, and that's a file. Where I almost have no variables in, but that's okay. That's why we're here. So to make a variable, we're going to define. And if you see over here, I've already got them set up, but these don't actually point to anything. So we're going to define a variable called myTitle. And it's going to be called a very cool title. So now we have a variable called myTitle and my name. Jesse. I just have a first name now. So yeah, I think that's all the variables I want to make right now. And this is not config anymore. It was, well, apparently I still call it config up there. So again, you can change the prefix. I'll change it to var just for this slideshow. So now we can see if that works. Actually, I don't know if it will, but this is the fun part of it. So I've created a few scripts in here. I don't know if you have this downloaded. I have a Markdown script, which will output the text as Markdown. If you wanted to put it on, say, a Git hosting repo that renders Markdown. There's one that will generate all of these Scribble files as separate HTML files, so you don't have a giant, super long page that people just scroll up and down. And I also have a single page file. I think for this one, we can do a single page if you wanted. And we can just see if that works or My computer's slow, so bear with me. Okay, so it works. So we do. Yeah, my computer's super slow. We can see that it's got our very cool title here. It's by me, and this text is already here, but we have requirements. Requirements doesn't have anything yet, but yeah, it's generating requirements, which is a separate Scribble document, as we can see in source. You can see it right down here. And let's make this about making tea, I guess. So before making your tea, I don't know, ensure, I can do some really bad technical writing. Have this stuff. There we go. So that's going to make a normal paragraph text. And what you can do is we're going to make an item list, right? Because why would you list requirements on a single line? That would drive me nuts. Okay, item list. Tough crowd. So we have item. What do we need? We need water. We need a kettle to boil the water, right? What do we need? We need something.
Tea.
We need tea, yeah. I'm putting pressure on you guys instead. That capitalized. My eyes are going blurry here. Do we need anything else? Do we want sugar in our tea?
We need a mug.
Oh my god, yeah. Sorry. A mug. Anything else?
Milk.
Milk. Oh,
Yeah, we want milk.
milk drinker. Okay, I think that's enough. Unless someone wants to add more. No, you don't. Okay. So let's see if that works. Did I do it on a single page last time? You know, let's do it on a separate page. So we're going to generate a separate page. Probably doing this a really slow way, so don't laugh at me. Developers. Come on, autocomplete. Oh, that's my fault, not the computer. So yeah, again, this looks really boring. Looks exactly the same as our other one, right? But notice, so on the same page, and we've got our sweet list here, including our mug. So yeah, notice how Scribble doesn't auto-indent these bullets. That kind of pisses me off. That's really gross. That's okay. We'll leave it at that. That's for another workshop. So let's go to the source. What else we have? Let's make a new Scribble file called. What's our next step? Starting the kettle. I don't know. Pouring the water into the kettle. Okay, starting the kettle. We're not going to go that far. I'm just going to call it starting. Let me know if I'm actually. Let me know if I'm going over the time, by the way.
Okay.
So I'm just going to copy the old file, so I don't have to retype everything. And this is called starting. Did I say starting the kettle? Again, so we won't have this stuff. Starting the kettle. Okay, let's do a caution, right? Because we don't want to burn ourselves. This is gonna be. We're gonna go wild again. I'm gonna get. This is gonna be a really big warning. And I can't spell. So we have a margin note that now says caution. This looks like it hurts the eyes, but don't worry. Kettle may be hot after boiling. I don't know. It's bad that I'm using passive voice and procedural running. That's okay. So yeah, so we've added a new file. One thing, again, this is to stay organized. Otherwise, we could just do it all in one text document. Is we have to remember to add it. So go here, and we're gonna call it. We called it starting, right? So then can do terminal. Okay, yeah, that's cool. So let's do sure single document. Okay, I think this would just change to single. Sorry. screwed up. Oh, it's just one document. Okay. So you can see that we've got starting the kettle. It snaps to the starting kettle section, and there's our big sweet caution text right down here. Now, if we wanted to change the order of that, all we have to do is go into the main, which I'm already in. Why am I doing this? And just change the order of them. And then generate. And now magic. Now we're doing taboos and technical writing. Okay. So, I mean, there's quite a few things you can do in it. I guess I covered sections. This right here, this is a table of contents. If you look, actually, if you look down here, you can see the table of contents. It is small there. But what this does is it takes, and it's got to be in the root document. So it's the first document that occurs, and that's main. So what it does is it searches for any sections you've included, these ones, or if we wanted, we could add a section in here. Lots of cool references in here. I have a subsection. What? It's going to search through all of these sections that are in the document, and it's going to auto-generate a table of contents for you based on their hierarchy. And yeah, we'll see what that looks like. Separate looks nicer. Like it's yelling at me because I did something wrong. I can't see that. Let's just exit this. Okay, yeah, so it's yelling at me because I'm doing a bad hierarchy. So I'm breaking technical writing rules, so that's my fault. So I believe it's because, so that's another thing that's handy too, is if you're afraid of writing the wrong syntax, it's gonna yell at you. It's gonna tell you that you can't have a title after a section. And that sounds like something silly that should be intuitive, but given how many times I have mistyped a markdown like hashtag as just a single hashtag instead of like double and screwed up the generation table of contents, I think it's a really valuable thing to have with it too. Yeah, you can kind of see how handy it is for organizing, especially on big documents. You don't want to be going through an entire text file up and down, trying to figure out where the error is. If you look here, you can see that it's in main.scribble, and we know that we have to go to main.scribble to figure out what's wrong. So it's kind of like you're paying through you're paying for good documentation or a nicely generated document by having to deal with a compiler. And I mean, you can take it or leave it. It depends on if that's for you. If not, that's probably best to stick to Markdown. Yeah, you can do cool things. Maybe we can try to add. Let's go into starting. We can add a picture. This tea is hot. Yeah, this is not technical writing anymore. But we can have an image, and basically you just got to name the image, and this is going to give me. I'm going to show you what it's like to fix an error. So we have t.png, and I do have the image file. I promise you. If we go to image here, you can see that there's a t.png. If I try to compile it, it's going to yell at me. It's telling me, if you look up here, I know this is really scary looking, but look up here, you can see t.png. So all we know is it's something about a picture, right? It hates that picture. Why does it hate it? Let's go down to the next line. No such file directory. It's telling me it doesn't exist. What the hell is Scribble? So what we can do is, if you look at it, it's actually in the image folder, and we didn't tell it's in the image folder. That's my fault. So what we can do is we go to starting, And all we gotta do is prefix that with image. Oops. What am I doing? There we go. Image. Go up. Single sh. Talking to myself, sorry. And now we've got this beautiful picture I drew of tea. So now this tea is hot. So I don't like how big that picture is. Let's go into here and change the size of the picture. So what we can do is we can use those cool hashtag looking things and we can change the scale of it to half the size. So we change it to half the size. What is going on here? The optometrist said I don't need glasses. Believe that. So let's watch that image change shape. All right, so now we got a nice small image. Sometimes if you look at, you can put images anywhere. You've just got to be careful that you don't do. I don't remember. I have so many images in here that. Oh, it's a big and bolder. Okay, yeah. So you can kind of see here. I broke this margin note, and this guy's popping out of the image. So it's handy to deal with that kind of stuff because the reason it's doing that is because when it's generating the HTML pages, it wants to make sure that the pages will render on mobile. So if you do change this to a mobile size, you can kind of see that, I mean, it's still ugly because I didn't put it on a separate line, but it still works, right? And you've got a nice previous slide, next slide. I think that's all I'm going to cover today. I'm definitely over the time that I was allocated. I apologize for that. But yeah, thanks. Questions or anything? I might be able to answer them. Might not. Hey.
Hey, it's really cool. I never even heard of this before.
Yeah.
Is there a way to change some of the styling? Like, is there a way?
Yes. So when it does generate, so I'll go to the separate page generation. You have all the CSS files here, so you can modify that. And apparently there's a way to, when you're running the Scribble tool, if I go to here, this is the script I'm running. I don't know if that's easier. That's hard to see. Anyways, you can kind of see where it says hyphen H. You've used like grep. I remember you talking stuff before. So you can set options for the CSS source and tell it which files to add into the CSS. I don't know if it'll overwrite the original CSS, but you can do stuff like that. And I haven't learned how to do that yet because I'm still learning Scribble. But yeah, you can change the style. For example, if there's one preset that looks like an old school Web 2.0 file. So if you change the language to Akmar, I don't know what that stands for. Single. You'll see that I only did it for the first page. Where am I? I'm lost in all these files that I'm. All right. Okay, yeah. So you can kind of see that it looks pretty old school right now. This is very different than the original fancy looking one here. But yeah, you can change the CSS you want. I think this is like the base CSS for Scribble. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey.
Is there like a hot reload, or like have you found working on bigger projects that it takes a really long time to build? Yeah.
I've never tried building a really big project, but I guess you could do some weird like cron job and have it repeat, or like some loop in a bash script or something. But live reloading would be really handy. I do know some browsers support that. There's a browser called Beaker Browser, which has a live reloading feature, and that might be something to experiment with. But that's really cool idea. I see another. Hey.
So you said that Scribble was more expressive than Markdown? Because I wrote it down. So
expressive in the sense that you can do more. You can. I feel like there's more freedom. So sometimes when I'm writing Markdown, if you're writing a line and a line on the line directly under it, depending on what's rendering it, it'll either be on the it'll render inline with the previous line, unless you put a space. But some Markdown parsers don't do that. And I find that having to deal with white space can be an issue in Markdown. I'm not someone to say that because I'm obviously not a professional in this kind of stuff. But yeah, I felt like it was more expressive in that I can do anything I want in Scribble, as long as I spend hours tinkering with it. Any other questions?
I have a question about interactivity. So I visited one of the earlier meetups here, and I think the Shopify team showed the page and how they do it and how they evaluate user feedback. So there was a button at the bottom like, was this article helpful or not? You could say yes or no, or give like a rating or something. So this seems pretty static to me, but it's very nature. You compile this.
Yeah.
Is there any way to make it, to make it like that, to have a button?
I assume you could throw, you could probably throw like JavaScript inside of it. I've never tried rendering HTML inside of it. A really bad way of doing it, I guess, would be like going into the generated HTML, adding some JavaScript, or having like a form that calls like a server-side script. I'm not sure though. That's a really good like downside to this if it can't do that. Yeah. But yeah. Oh, sorry. I don't know. That's my answer. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. That was really cool. Yeah.
There we go.
So I'm not going to worry about. It went onto the. Never mind. I was going to say I wasn't going to worry about getting it onto the big screen, but it looks like it's there. So never mind me. But that's the end of our programming for the day. You can find out about the next meetup. We already have a posting for it, but we haven't announced the speaker yet because we're still finalizing our speakers for the spring. But you can expect to see the speaker get announced next week or week and a half, and hopefully we'll be able to announce like the next 2 or 3. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter. If you have any questions about the meetup, Shopify, or anything like that, you can come and talk to me. And we have this room until 8 o'clock, so feel free to have a snack and relax. Thanks again, Jesse.
Sorry. It's with speaker there, so
No, that's fine.
it's hard to give ideas.
No,
It's definitely a tool at least.
No, when I tried it,
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I wouldn't work on it.
Yeah.
could investigate.
Now, mind you, I mean, I don't.
Or I went
The Rails app, so.
Yeah.
But the Markdown itself, like, white space, great.
Gotta use Scribble today.
Styling.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
The pages look like.
Even though we're coloring kind of.
Right, yeah, there's.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So I
just
think
replace
you're
like
right.
our curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you use my project.
I went
Yeah,
technical,
just-
right? So that's my background.
I think like
Yeah,
just have like
yeah.
a town hall.
Yeah, I'd love to try to put
See your-
Excel or something.
Yeah.
Like a training slide. Apparently our two phones like that's like save the second or year or something.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah,
Acquired
yeah, it was very cool.
company.
Good like demonstration.
Yeah, so in 2000.
Yeah, the blue one.
Yeah, I think it's always like
Paper salt or
you're always kind of like, oh, then you think it's like, oh, set like one thing you do.
And I actually went to.
Have an idea of companies, so it's just kind of like.
And I still write on
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you get 19.
Yeah, because they always have their own like
you check out his.
Hey,
Or-
High school together.
Yeah, 3 years ago. Yeah, on actually on that website.
Really?
I was a little.
And then
If I can log into the internet,
recruiter,
certain
I'm
ones
hearing,
each other were on the game.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like
and then.
it literally is an intentional community.
It's
I
really
just
out of my
put
hands,
brand on there as well, like Upwork,
Yeah,
and a lot of
it's-
people's Instagram is on there, so I'd be like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They're like, try it out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
Oh.
it.
They got help. There's like 15 people at your top today.
Thank you for.
You can definitely learn that.
Hi.
Before that, was that was
It was kind of awesome. I highly recommend it.
catches all the chatter.
And there's
Yeah, maybe you'll try
That our big man's.
I like how you can kind of just leave it organized.
Oh, actually, yeah, we
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
that was